Yo! Hello guys, welcome back to my channel. In this video, I'm gonna tell you a short story from spoiler anime apocalypse bringer Mynoghra episode 3. So without further ado, let's jump into our main topic. After founding their new nation, Takuto and Atu were immediately faced with a new problem. On this continent, there were two major nations aligned with the forces of good, one a human kingdom that worshipped a benevolent god, and the other an elven nation that worshipped nature. Both held immense power, vast lands, and advanced civilizations. And in the middle of it all stood Mynoghra, the nation of dark elves, regarded by all as a race of evil. Even worse, the land they now inhabited, the cursed forest of Daijukai, was utterly devoid of resources. No food, no minerals, no magical power. Even within the game, this kind of area would be marked as a zero productivity zone. In other words, a complete wasteland. Takuto and Atu rolled around in the grass, lamenting their misfortune, even joking about resetting the map, just like in their previous game. But there was no other choice now. The Dark Elves were their people, and having a non-human race as citizens from the start could very well become their greatest asset. As Takuto began monitoring the activity of his people, he received more reports from Elder Mortar, who returned the following morning. With him came the chief of soldiers, Gia, and his aide Emul, a slim, bespectacled figure known for his intelligence and deep knowledge of geopolitics. They presented their report with utmost formality, bowing with respect, but Takuto felt uncomfortable with such stiff ceremonial behavior. He was just an ordinary man, not used to being treated like a god. Seeing this, Atu stepped in and explained that Takuto preferred a more relaxed and respectful tone, not empty formalities. For the Dark Elves, this was a shocking revelation. But if their king said so, then surely it wasn't Takuto who was wrong. It was their old beliefs that needed to be reformed. Before continuing their discussion of the world, Takuto made his first national policy announcement. Elder Mortar would be placed in charge of administration and magic, while Gia would command the military forces. Gia boldly declared that he would kill all enemies for the sake of his king, but Takuto's response was surprising. He gave only a stone-faced look. He wasn't the kind of bloodthirsty king Gia had imagined. Atu clarified that their king preferred peace and was more interested in domestic affairs than warfare. Gia was confused, his entire worldview shaken, but as always he submitted to the will of his king. If the king desired peace, then that was the ultimate truth. As a first step, Atu ordered them to rest. Their thin bodies needed to recover before they could even think about building a nation. Takuto was then asked whether he wanted to begin gathering building materials and choosing a construction site. In his mind, he began to consider the nature of the Dark Elf race. Suddenly, an idea struck him. What if they could build without cutting down the forest? He asked Elder Mortar whether it was possible to construct facilities without destroying nature. Mortar replied that while the Dark Elves weren't as attuned to nature as the Elves of Light, they still viewed the forest as their home. They preferred aerial structures that integrated with large trees rather than clearing empty land. Takuto was delighted to hear this. The benefits of the forest were immense, especially for sanitation and population growth. He then ordered them to gather wood and other materials, but only what was necessary, without harming the environment. He even used a specific term, reforestation. Everyone present was inspired by this one brief sentence from the king. To them, it felt like a magical incantation, a spell of fortune. But Gia, in his innocent confusion, finally mustered the courage to ask, hesitantly, what exactly does reforestation mean? Atu was speechless. Once again, the pure-hearted chief of soldiers, Gia, had effortlessly shattered the serious mood with his innocent question. When Gia sincerely asked about the technology of afforestation or reforestation, he did so without shame, knowing that hiding ignorance only leads to ruin. But Takuto's reaction was unexpected. The king suddenly fell silent, his dark form slightly trembling, clearly shaken by the question. Takuto then posed the question to everyone present. Does anyone here know what afforestation is? Even Elder Mortar and Emul, both highly educated, shook their heads. They had never heard the term. When Takuto mentioned magical technologies from the game Eternal Nations, such as 6-element magic in floating weapons and dimensional summoning, The dark elves could only stare blankly. To them, it all sounded like fantasy. Even Mortar had only mastered the basic four-element magic. Atu tried to understand the magical capabilities of the dark elves. From Emil's explanation, it became clear. Their mages were used only for healing on the backlines. There was no structured magical combat force. Atu concluded that this world was severely underdeveloped in magic. The conversation returned to the fundamental question: what is afforestation? Atu explained it simply. It is the process of replanting trees in areas that have been cleared in order to maintain vegetation, preserve wood resources, and protect the environment. Elder Mortar understood. Normally, forests are cut down to make farmland. But if trees could be regrown with magic, then reforestation could be a long-term investment. He began to see that King Takuto, despite being from another world, possessed a truly extraordinary vision. Then came the next question: where does all this knowledge come from? With pride, Atu answered, "It all comes from our great God, His Majesty, Ira Takuto." Of course, Takuto panicked, trying to object, but no words came out. Atu continued her praise unabated, even claiming that Takuto was the one who discovered the true cause of the plague in the Holy Kingdom of Qualia. Not a demonic curse, but an overpopulation of rats caused by the extermination of cats. Takuto could only suffer in silence. He knew that truth came from scientific knowledge from his old world, not from himself alone. Atu then explained bacteria as tiny invisible creatures that could make humans sick, and that healing required scientific methods, not just blood or prayer. All of this was attributed to the knowledge of the king. Takuto tried to remain calm even as he was constantly overwhelmed by exaggerated praise. When Emil mentioned that he had planted grape seeds from the fruit Takuto gave him, Atu became furious, saying Emil had acted without royal permission. But Takuto couldn't focus on that. He was too struck by the revelation. Seeds from the modern world could grow in this one. That meant food from his old world could be cultivated here. And if food could be produced, then resources could be created. Takuto decided to test something. He opened his palm, and in an instant, a small aluminum can appeared. It was undeniable proof that he could create modern materials using magical power. His mind began to race. If he could create metals like aluminum and iron, or even fertilizer ingredients like phosphate, then he could lay the foundations of industry and technology from scratch. Even the production of gunpowder and weapons could become reality. The key was simple: a vast reserve of magical energy. But as the king and central pillar of this nation, Takuto did not see that as a problem. He immediately began drafting plans for Mynoghra's development strategy. With this, our nation can grow without limits. Takuto gave a small smile. Atu, seeing this, smiled deeply in return. Emul, who had been afraid for planting those seeds, was now praised. "It's okay," Takuto said. "You've done a wonderful job." Takuto now had not only power and authority, but also direction and vision. He was no longer just a king from another world. He had become the architect of Mynoghra's future. The continent of Hydragia is a circular landmass, stretching from north to south. In the south lies wild and undeveloped territory, dense forests like Daijukai, and primitive barbarian nations. Meanwhile, in the north, only two major powers exist: the Holy Kingdom of Qualia, ruled by humans, and the Elnar Federation, ruled by elves. Despite being of different races, both northern nations enjoy prosperity. One of the primary sources of their strength is the Seijo, holy women who serve as ultimate weapons in warfare. In the northern province of Qualia, a remote snow-covered land, a young girl stood alone amidst the blizzard. Her name was Soarena, a Seijo known as the Funeral Flower, one of the 7 holy saviors of the continent. When thousands of snow goblins invaded northern villages, Seiyo Soarena stepped forward alone. With a single nod and a prayer, she raised her hand, and in an instant, hellfire rained from the skies. Within seconds, thousands of goblins and the surrounding land were reduced to ash. Nothing remained except scorched earth and blooming flowers, as if conducting a funeral. Such is the power of the Seijo. They are not ordinary humans. They are living miracles who bring either blessings or destruction. However, beneath her strength, Soarina harbored unease. She sensed the signs of disaster in the southern part of the continent, in Daijukai. But when she requested permission from the cardinals to deploy holy forces there, she was met only with rejection and mockery. The cardinals called her a village girl, forgetting that before them stood a Seijo who had saved thousands of lives. Soarina said nothing. Her eyes were blank like a doll's, untouched by insult. Yet her resolve did not waver. If she had to, she would go alone, elsewhere, or more precisely. A few weeks later, the nation of Mynoghra was steadily growing. Takuto, the silent yet visionary king, had begun internal development of his country. A modest building now stood tall. Takuto sat on his throne, quietly appreciating the hard work of his people and army. With great enthusiasm, Atu declared it was time to build a food production facility. Though Takuto could create food instantly, he understood that logistical needs would grow. Infrastructure had to be built. And the first facility they would plant was no ordinary field. Atu produced a seed. Not a fruit tree seed, but this is a human meat tree. Everyone fell silent. Elder Mortar was stunned. This tree did not originate from their world. It was a magical plant from Atu civilization that produced mysterious meat, identical in taste to human flesh, yet not made from humans. A bizarre but effective solution to food shortages. Though awkward at first, Elder Mortar eventually accepted it. Hunger was far more terrifying than disgust, and the king had spared them from a tragic choice. Touching his throne, Takuto made a silent vow. With my own hands, I will lead them to happiness. He knew. The happier his people, the stronger his nation's magic power would become. And with that power, Takuto would build a nation beyond compare. With food production complete, the next focus shifted to two things, military and research. That day, a national meeting was held again. As always, Atu sat beside Takuto, serving as the spokesperson and execution commander. Today's topic is research, Takuto said briefly. Yup, it's finally time. Atu replied, beaming like a child with a new toy. Atu, the eternal companion, spoke a single word. Magic technology. Takuto nodded. Atu lit up with excitement, and the entire room stirred with energy. Though this world differed from eternal nations, the principle of national power remained the same. Whoever controls technology controls the future. Elder Mortar, leader of the Dark Elves, felt his youthful passion return. He had once been a great sorcerer before getting lost in politics and leadership. Now his thirst for magical knowledge rekindled. I'm excited too. It's been so long since I've studied new magic, he admitted. Their bonds grew closer. The fear that once lingered was gone. Takuto remained mostly silent, letting Atu be the face of the government. Atu then elaborated. Military magic was no longer just spells for individuals. It was large-scale magic for armies. A technology that transformed small skirmishes into grand magical battles. Something that had never existed in this world. Mortar was speechless. He knew his knowledge hadn't reached that level. His fire magic could only burn small groups. He couldn't imagine what military magic truly was, but he couldn't suppress his curiosity. Select the most skilled magic users from our people. Let them become our researchers, Atu ordered, and prepare a research facility. We begin now. Yes, I'll act immediately, Mortar responded. Then, once the research facilities and plans for advanced magical studies were established, Takuto smiled and addressed everyone. Alright, the third stage, enhancing Mynoghra's military strength, I will summon a new hero. Upon hearing that, Gia, standing near Mortar, immediately asked, Lady Atu, what exactly is a hero? Atu quickly explained. A hero is a servant of the king with immense power. They are insane monsters, impossible to control. But even so, heroes have the ability to continually grow stronger over time. The problem is, summoning one is incredibly difficult. It requires vast resources and massive amounts of mana. With our current power, Takuto-sama can only summon one more hero. At that moment, Takuto added, "That's right. A single hero equals an entire royal army. I originally wanted to form a regular army like yours, but managing a large force right now is impossible. We don't have enough food. Mana and other needs are limited. So instead of struggling to manage 1,000 different soldiers, it's better to rely on a single powerful hero for our military. At least that's all I can manage with my current strength." Hearing this, Elder Mortar turned to his king and asked, "My king, I don't mean to doubt you, but I'm curious. Are heroes truly that powerful?" At that moment, Atu stepped forward. "It's faster if I show you. Explaining it in theory won't be convincing." Without hesitation, Atu unleashed her power. From beneath her robes, spider-like tentacles burst forth in massive numbers. She swiftly slashed through every tree around her. Within seconds, they were all destroyed. Then she turned to them and spoke again. "Listen, I am one of Takuto-sama's heroes. My current power is still incomplete. In my prime, this is only 1,000th of what I can truly do." Seeing this firsthand, the people of Mynoghra were utterly shocked. It was the first time they had witnessed such overwhelming strength. But on the other hand, Takuto's expression was emotionless. Wearing a flat-faced emoji look, he gave Atu a wry smile and said, "Oi Atu, why did you go and destroy the forest? Don't forget to clean up those tree stumps after showing off." Hearing her king's words, Atu panicked. Without delay, she ran off to clean up the remnants of the forest she had just obliterated. And with this, story comes to end. As always, thank you so much for watching. Let me know what anime, manga, manhwa, or donghua should I cover next. See you again in the next video. Ciao!